Okay, so let's get started with the 2004 expedition here. I'm gonna, as I mentioned earlier in some of the posts, John Prine, the great musician and poet, passed away a couple day before yesterday due to complications from COVID-19. So I'm actually going to start by just quoting one of my favorite John Prine lyrics, and it's a song called "Souvenirs." And I put it on the website on the page. Some of you may have seen it. I'll just read the first two stanzas. All the snow has turned to water. Christmas days have come and gone. Broken toys and faded colors are all that's left to linger on. I hate graveyards and old pawn shops, for they always bring me tears. I can't forgive the way they rob me of my childhood souvenirs. Memories, they can't be bought. They can't be won at carnivals for free. Well, it took me years to get those souvenirs, and I don't know how they slipped away from me. So, as I was reliving some of my own souvenirs in putting this together, that song was definitely resonating in my head. As an aside, the same summer in 2004, Kelly Cordes and Josh Wharton climbed a really impressive route on Great Trango Tower, and the story in the American Alpine Journal that Kelly wrote is titled "Souvenirs," after the same song. So it has something to do with this. So I'm going to, come on. There we go. I'm going to sort of start this, I want to set the scene just a little bit mentally. This was this little quote at the top was something that resonated a lot with me during this time. And I want to point out, especially in sitting here in 2020, that in 2004, though it doesn't seem like that long ago in some ways, it was basically pre-social media, and the ethic, the best thing you could do, the coolest thing you could do as a climber was to do the raddest climb, the most amazing ascents, and not talk about it. Like, that was basically the goal. So the more you kind of talked about it and blabbed about it, the more it sort of would diminish your accomplishment. So that is kind of how we thought about the stuff back at that time. And in a way, I have to say I kind of miss that era. That was a big part of my mindset when I was in this part of my life. And it wasn't just me individually. I think it was sort of a cultural thing of climbing, but especially of alpine climbing. So we were in this incredible valley, and I'm going to give you a whole tour of this valley that's full of incredible peaks. And I had been here, as you guys know, and it's on YouTube now, to talk about the year before when I first discovered, for myself at least, the Charakusa Valley and did a few climbs. So we came back in 2004 with a larger group of people. And when I came back, this is just this is what I wrote on the front page of my journal. And this is, I actually have my journal here. And I'm actually going to read a quote from it later, but there's, the what's on the screen there. And this was just sort of my maybe guiding principles. These were just what I jotted down, probably, I don't even know at what point, but this was the kind of thing that we were after. It was really more of an internal journey, I want to say. And I think that's part of what I want to emphasize today, or try to set the stage for, because this was a very private affair, what we were doing over here climbing, not just me personally, but my climbing partners on the trip. So I used this picture on the talk about the 2003 expedition, and this is when I first came down from my first ascent of Hajji Brakk, which I did in, I think it's 19 hours, and that was I would say kind of a lot. It changed me. That experience of climbing that mountain and that expedition in 2003 definitely changed me. And that's, I think, what to me is the ideal goal of going on an expedition. You want to come back somehow different, and that's the important thing. So on this expedition in 2004, because I'd been there and I had probably a high degree of motivation, I organized a group of people, and I was the expedition leader, which mostly means that you're the banker. That I am changing money in some like random money changing stall late at night in Rawalpindi. Like, you know, this expedition, I looked for my budget for this expedition and I could not find it. There was, I just don't know. I would keep looking. I've got it somewhere. But I had a notebook just basically for the accounting, and I have every expense recorded. But I'm guessing that this expedition with all of us was not including airfares, because airfares are kind of individual. I generally don't count those. But you know, I'd say just the Charakusa part, you know, it was probably like $1,500 to $2,000 a piece. Wasn't, you know, that's the price range we're looking at. So who was on this trip? It was myself as the leader. It was Marko Prezel, the Slovenian climber who I'd been on a couple of expeditions with already at this point. Doug Chabot. Doug and I are really old friends. I met Doug when I was in 1991 when I was guiding for an outfit called American Alpine Institute. He was one of my first co-instructors. Doug is a great guy. Been on a couple of trips with him, and he is the director of the Avalanche Center for Gallatin National Forest in Bozeman. So if you go backcountry skiing in Bozeman, you check the forecast. You have Doug to thank for that. Bruce Miller. Bruce, I only knew, I'd met a couple of times before this trip, but I didn't know super well. And Bruce lives over in Boulder. He's a carpenter and one of these kind of like really accomplished, really skilled climbers that, you know, isn't very well known. That's never been his thing. His thing has been, like, as I said, to just kind of work and go climbing. And he's still at it. He's still over there doing that. So, and then Bruce and I went on to attempt the Rupal face of Nanga Parbat a couple of months after this was taken. Steve Swenson, this is on the trip. You'll see this picture again. Steve Swenson was another old friend of mine. I met Steve in 1995 on the West Fork of the Kahiltna Glacier with Alex Lowe. He and I have been on a number of expeditions together now. He's been on another number of expeditions as well. I don't have a portrait of him, so I'm going to use this only one of the few pictures I have of him that shows his face at all. This is Jeff Hollenbaugh standing here. Jeff lives over also lives here in Western Colorado. And he was on this expedition. He and I had been on a couple of expeditions together, particularly a very productive one in the Ruth Gorge of Alaska in September, where we climbed a couple of good routes. And then this was Amin. Amin was our liaison officer. Fairly typical liaison officer type guy that you get for an area like this. There's different, depending on how close you are to the line of control with India, depends on kind of the rank of liaison officer you get. Amin was a captain. He was a really nice guy. I think he was young. I think he was like 23 or 25 or something like that. He was really excited because he was getting married after this expedition. And a little insight into culture, I mean, the marriage was totally arranged by his parents. He'd never even met this woman. But he was like, he had this like little tiny picture of her and he was so excited about getting married. So he was actually a great addition to our trip, and we had a really good time with him. He was a really nice guy, very engaging, very humble, a lot of fun to have conversations with, and was definitely a net positive on the trip. Generally with my liaison officers I've had in Pakistan, I've had almost all good experiences in Pakistan with LOs. You hear some, you know, they have a bad, you know, take one really bad story and then the whole reputation of all liaison officers is tainted. But I've always had good experiences with these people. So getting up into the Charakusa Valley, basically the way you go, I'm not going to, you somehow get to a town called Skardu, which is the capital of Baltistan. And then from there you take, you load up in these Jeeps with your gear and you pick up some hitchhikers along the way and you drive up there. Most of the road doesn't look like this. This is just one section where it was washed out. Most of the road is actually paved. And then the last like 3 hours are pretty rough, like Jeep road, where sections are washed out like this, and where it's not washed out, it's basically like a bad Forest Service road in the States for the last few hours. You get to this little village called, which is the last village that you can drive to, called Hushe. You usually spend a night there, and then you get your, the porters are getting their loads, and you kind of get organized, and then head out the next morning. You can see that's the summit of Masherbrum behind me, which is at the head of the Hushe Valley. A couple of local boys. We're just heading up the valley here. So it's basically sometimes people will take 3 days to get up to the Charakusa base camp. Part of it is on trail, and part of it is going over these typical sort of Karakoram rubble-covered glaciers. It's quite a pretty walk. A lot of the times, like in this picture, you're on the edge of the glacier, and this is actually the peak I talked about last time. This is Hajji Brakk that I made the first ascent of via that left-hand face somewhere. This would be the west face that we're looking at here, and this is the husband and the wife, Fati, and I forgot the other word. So this is the base camp, and then one of the highlights of this expedition is going to the Charakusa is simply the base camp. This was 2004, so it's 16 years ago. I know this area has become a lot more popular, and not in any small part thanks to me, unfortunately. But it is what it is, and I don't know if it's still as beautiful as it is, but this was an incredible spot. I mean, it's still an incredible spot, I'm sure. Hopefully it's still as pristine as it used to be. You can see this is like a little freshwater stream that would run down and it would come all the way through here and go out here. So we had a beautiful source of fresh water. This is our mess tent for eating. This is a cook tent. This is Rasul's tent where he would sleep. This was Amin's tent. And then each member had their own tent. There's one hidden over here that you can't quite see, this little yellow dot, but it's really nice to have your own. This is my spot because that's my white barrel that I still have, but it's really nice to have your own tent on these trips just so you have a little space to chill out. But this is the elevation here is about 4,200 meters if I remember right. So another picture looking from farther away, the base camp is basically right below this buttress, right behind this summit. This over here is the K7 Massif, just to get oriented. As you can see, there's a lot of rock, and there have been quite a few rock routes established here that are quite close to base camp. You see ibex on this buttress all the time, and it's one nice thing is you can walk right up here, and this is just, you can walk up here in tennis shoes, and you can get up pretty high. You can actually get up to these little passes. This little summit is like, I forget now. We actually slept on top of it one year. I think it's like around 17,000 feet, a little less than 5,000 meters, or right around 5,000 meters. Maybe it's 18,000 feet, I don't remember. When you're looking north here, you're looking into the area where the line of control is. There's another valley here. But it's actually, and then there's so this is really nice that there's so much, this big floodplain, there's boulders all over it, and we'll talk about the bouldering here in a second. So there is quite a bit of cool climbing to do here that this still could be done. This is the wife, and there's obviously this gorgeous dihedral system that comes up here. The rock, I want to say, on this side of the valley is generally not as good as the rock on the base camp side of the valley. So this is Hajji Brakk, and looking back across again, this is base camp would be out of view to the looker's right here. And there's a really beautiful peak I'm going to talk about quite a bit called Nasser Brakk that's right here that we climbed multiple times. I'm going to go into that. I did the first ascent of this ridge, and I did the first ascent of this ridge, and then there's a route called the British route. I don't know who did it. That comes up from the back. And Marco and Vince and I in 2007 climbed this, and we wanted to climb all of this, but we didn't get there, and for some some point here we bailed off, and then Conrad Anker and Peter Croft climbed this ridge to somewhere. I'm not sure how far they got, if they got to there, or I don't remember. And then this is Chogolisa here, and you can see just K2 with his head in the clouds back here. So you can walk, as I said, pretty high, and you can do rock climbing right out of base camp as a day trip, which is a huge advantage to having a base camp. One of the great things about this area is the fact that you can do other climbing that's not sort of super alpine. You can just go cragging, basically. You can even go bouldering if you've only got 2 hours of dry weather. Again, base camp's right here. This is K7. This is that little, we called it Solo Brach, I think. Solu Brach, maybe, I can't remember. This is a really beautiful mountain that has only been climbed a couple of times, and there's still a lot of potential of new routes on this peak. I'll have to remember the name of it. This is another really beautiful mountain that actually I'll talk about almost climbing on this expedition. This is called Drifika. This is about, I had to write the name. It's 6,400 meters. So you do need a trekking permit for this, but it's a pretty cheap permit, easy to get. What is the name of this mountain? I'm forgetting. I'll have to think of it later. But yeah, Steve Swenson and Raphael Slowinski tried to climb this mixed line here and didn't succeed, so that's waiting to be done. Somebody should go finish that. And I think there'd be really cool climbing, just climbing this ridge, which has not been climbed. To this summit, I think this section would be really gnarly. But the main summits have been climbed mostly from you come up around the back, and you can get up these summits relatively easily. Maxime Tourjean climbed one of these, I don't remember which one, on one expedition, not an expedition I was on. There's that same mountain from a little different angle, and you can see Masherbrum poking up here with these pretty cool big long rock buttresses. Nice, safe, not a lot of objective hazard on those, so really nice mountains. This is another mountain that Raphael Solinsky and Kevin Mahoney climbed. They went up behind in here like this, and they called this Hassan Peak or Hassan Peak. This was later, maybe 2008, 2009, I don't remember. There's another view of it. I always wanted to climb this amazing waterfall slab thing here. I don't know, it does change quite a bit. There it is in pretty thick conditions, and this twin slab comes down next to it, or twin runnel comes down next to it. Those guys skirted around the left here, which would be the easy, obvious way to go. This is Chogolisa from the south. I don't believe that anyone's climbed this beautiful ridge from here, although I could be wrong. The normal route that was climbed years and years ago comes from here, and this somewhere along here is where Herman Buhl was killed along through a cornice. And then getting into the super alpine objectives, we're kind of moving from clockwise around the valley. This is K6 West, and Ian Walsh and Raphael Slowinski climbed up through here and up to the shoulder, and then up to the summit of K6 West, making the first ascent of this summit. And that I actually attempted that twice, once solo, once with Marco and Vince. And then this is looking, there's K6, this is the Husband Peak that I mentioned before, where the rock isn't quite as good. It would still be worth some exploration. I think, as is typical here, the rock lower is going to be the worst. But some of the stuff up high, if you could get up there, could be actually pretty good. These towers down here below K6 seem quite chossy in my explorations. And then this looks right into the main face of K6. This is the main summit, and this is the west summit. And this whole face is completely virgin. Nobody's climbed anything, or even as far as I know, attempted anything in here. There's some serac hazard that's pretty significant here and over here. So you'd be restricted to safe lines on the buttresses, which are all obviously fairly technical. And then this mountain over here I'll talk about in a minute is called Kapura Peak. We did the first ascent of that mountain on this expedition. So the main idea for me was obviously K7. As I said last week, I had tried to come up here. And then I had discovered an entrance here, and I had climbed up to somewhere about in here on my final attempt in 2003, and then come back down this way. So I figured, felt like I knew how to do it, and had a lot of information. And one of the things with these big mountains is once you get some information about these things, it's pretty important to capitalize on it, in my opinion. Let me look for Linksar here real quick. Somebody asked about that. See if I have a picture of it. I don't think I do, actually. If I see Linksar later, I'll call it out, John. But it's at the head of the. It's not really in this valley. You can't. I don't think you can get to it from this valley. Honestly, those guys climbed it from the other side. Graham and Swenson and Mark Ritchie and Chris. So there's base camp again. Again, this is where you can just walk up, and you can see that Solu mountain is back up in here. This peak has been climbed and has some routes on it, and I think there could be more to be done there. And this is Nasser Brakk, it's called. And we spent, this is the British route. And then the route we climbed, we went up to this little notch and then climbed this. And then the next, Marco and Bruce climbed the sit start. And then Marco and Vince and I climbed the whole left skyline, actually. But that was years later in 2007. So incredible base camp, really a lovely place to spend time. And even if you just go there trekking, make sure you spend a couple of days here just to soak it up. It's really an incredible place. So I'm going to try to increase my pace a little bit because I'm never going to get through all this at this current pace. Yeah, and if somebody corrects me, I mean, I'm just going off my memory, and who climbed what with whom is not my strong suit. So I'm sure that those facts are out there. I'm not up on them. I wanted to mention the bouldering. The bouldering is really cool here. It would be worth bringing some, I wouldn't bring a bouldering pad, but you could go to Rawalpindi and buy a bunch of foam and carry it up here and make yourself an improvised bouldering mat. It's a really great way to kind of stay healthy and active. And there's tons of boulders here. I don't think it's like, Chris Sharma isn't going to make a trip there, but for alpinist level bouldering, which means sort of like, V3 and below probably. There's lots of fun stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff we didn't try because, you're on your own here. If you break a leg or, you could have a real problem. So, it's concern. You're not just going for it up here. This is Nasser Brakk, as I said, with the British route on the right, and then the two other routes I climbed there on the front and the left. And this is just a stunning little mountain. It's right around 5,000 meters, about 18,000 feet high. And you basically, for the British route, you go up this big snow. This is usually snow. It does melt out later in the season, and then you climb the skyline. So one of the first things we did is Marco and I think we were only in base camp a couple of days. And we weren't really acclimatized, but we went right up there. It's great to be in a camp where you can acclimatize on this kind of thing and don't have to just go like hike up a snow slope, but you can actually have some fun climbing. This is actually a picture taken in 2007, but it shows the British route really well. The notch is right here behind Marco's arm, and the crux is right out of the col here, get the steep part. And then it's just this super joyous, really fun ridge romp up here. Oh, there's Linksar. I think that's Linksar right there, actually. Super, super great climb. So there's Marco climbing up. There's the little notch. That's the steep part coming up here. This isn't like 5-star like rock climbing. Like if this was in Squamish or Yosemite, people would give it 1 star. But given where it is and the location, the ease of access, and how much fun it is really good. It's probably like 5.9, maybe 5.10A on the steep part, and then this part is just type 1 fun ridge romping. Yeah, I'm not the first person to introduce locals to bouldering. Lots of expeditions have introduced locals to bouldering, but there hasn't really caught on. So then the other thing we wanted to do is this pillar. So the first time I climbed this, we went, Marco and Steve Swenson and I went up and did it from here, and you could basically just hike to here. And like I said, the very next day, Marco and Bruce Miller took it from the bottom and then just linked all the way up. It sounded like a lot of this, you know, depending on who you ask. Bruce said it was pretty grassy, not that great. Marco said it was really great. So kind of depends on who you ask. That's my recollection anyway. But it is a really obviously cool line to start, obviously clear at the bottom. And this, as I remember, was about 11 pitches, and it was about 5'11". There's Marco leading one of the pitches right out of the notch, if I remember right. This was really, really high quality rock. You're kind of, one of the things here, you're right about the elevation where grass is going to stop growing in the cracks. So you don't really, here you're doing a little gardening, but as soon as you get a little higher, like you can see here, the vegetation is quite a bit less. So this is, I think, Marco again. I remember, I'm pretty sure, as I recall, I got the crux pitch, which was really cool for me, just randomly. And this was a really fun, I mean, climb. Nobody had been here before. This is like one of those days that I'll never forget for sure. Here's Steve in the green celebrating the position there, and then popping out. You pop out onto this beautiful little summit with this incredible background. It's K6 and Hassan Peak. And this is Marco's picture that he took of Steve and I on the summit with sort of more of the panorama view. You're actually catching a little bit of Hajji Brakk right over here. And this is the husband and Kapura and the K6s and Hassan. Really gorgeous. And you can kind of see, it's good to notice. So this would be, this is why I brought my journal. This would be basically the 1st of July. And so you can see where the snow line is here. Base camp is down here. So already the glacier is pretty well melted out up to about 4,500 meters. That's about almost 15,000 feet, right around 15,000 feet. You have to down climb the ridge. Again, really fun. I kind of just went ahead without the rope, and then Marco and Steve Swenson belayed down. You do some rappels. You can see from the amount of slings there that we were certainly not the first to descend or ascend. This is coming down into the knot. So this British route has been climbed quite a bit. So next I want to talk about Kapura Peak right here, because that was one of the things we actually had a permit for. We paid for a permit for that. It's 6,554 meters. So it's this, to put it in a little more perspective, there it is next to the almost 7,000 meter. I think this is just over 7,000 meters, K6 West. I'd have to check. So it looks big in that last picture, but not as big when it sits next to the real big boy. Again, it was a totally unclimbed peak. Nobody had even attempted it as far as we knew. This was the picture I had taken from the top of Hajji Brakk the year before, and this is how we went up. We used this picture as our route. We went up here and made a camp basically right up in here, against these rocks. We're able to sort of kind of climb up through here without belaying much, if at all, if I remember right. Maybe we belayed here, I can't recall. And then made a camp here, and then the next day I went to the summit and came back and went all the way down. So here's another little view of some of that, particularly the top part. It was actually fairly complicated climbing. You'll see some more pictures. So we actually, just as an acclimatization thing, carried some gear over to the base of the route because we weren't very acclimatized yet. This was about let's see. This was day 7 of the trip. We've already climbed Marco and I have already climbed 2 routes, one of which was a new route. Marco climbed the sit start as well. So Marco's done 3 routes, I've done 2 routes. So we've already been climbing, we're only a week into it. The next day we went up over to this little camp where we had the cache, and then we went up higher onto that shoulder the next day. This is Steve in the morning, getting ready to leave the camp. Oops, and then from that camp, we traversed out, climbed up, Steve Swenson and Doug Chabot and I climbed this, and then Marco and Vince and Jeff came up the next, so they were basically one day behind us. They sort of staggered behind us. So this was, I think this is Steve Swenson leading one of the first technical pitches up onto the ridge. And these pitches were typically like that. You can see this is Doug climbing. He's got the white helmet. The next technical pitch, there'd be some snow, and then you'd have to climb these technical bits. That's the following pitch. That's following that pitch that Doug had led. Really great pitch climbing. There those guys are, Doug and Steve, at that belay. And then I led the rest of the route, as I recall, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 more pitches. The hardest part was actually getting up onto the summit, because, and this is kind of, there was a cornice and it was actually kind of overhanging, and it was tricky climbing getting up there. And then this is Doug coming up through the cornice. By the time we got onto the top, it was kind of a little bit of a whiteout. It was hard to tell, you know, it was hard to see around us very much. But this was actually, like, we never talked about this climb, but it was actually one of my best memories was this ascent. It was not a giveaway. There was some technical climbing. It was definitely, you definitely felt like you're on your toes. As you can see there, we rappelled on this picket. And then you can just see barely Doug rappelling down first, and Steve's kind of got this expression on his face like, oh, I don't know about this. And so, yeah, we wrapped right off at the summit. So you can actually see here, I believe, maybe we can't. I think we went through the summit. I was looking at this picture earlier. I thought I could see a notch. Maybe I thought it was there. I don't remember. But this is where we climbed up and came down. We're climbing up through here. I had to go over this kind of ridge across and then went up onto the summit there. Going down was fairly complicated because descending these kind of ridges with all these cornices, and it's very technical, is pretty tricky. And basically we would rappel where we could, or in this case, I'd belay Doug over. He would set up an anchor, and then while he was setting up the anchor, you know, I'd start belaying Steve across, and they'd belay me over. I kind of came down last. Very, very spectacular, airy climbing, as you can see. Ideally, Doug, as soon as he's finished building his anchor, he'll start belaying Steve, so Steve will have a belay from each side there. And then from that place where Doug was, we made another anchor. So we had a couple of pickets that we left, and then we made mostly V-threads, ice screw V-threads to descend there. So then this is back in the camp. I always and I always encourage people, like, you know, take pictures right after you get down from a climb like that, because the eyes are always great. I miss Steve's eyes, unfortunately. These were film pictures. These were all taken on slide films. I don't have, you know, obviously this was pre-digital, but, you know, I always like to look at Doug's eyes. And you can see, you know, the headlamp technology of the time was not quite what it is now. Doug had his little light you know, and that was not something that was terribly uncommon. You can see I had one of these too, this was the first light that had like a little LED at the bottom and then this big brighter light at the top. And Doug used like a old Petzl zoom and a little Petzl Tika or whatever that was, kind of in combination to get the same effect. So then we went back to base camp, and then Jeff Hollenbaugh and I went up and tried to climb Drifika. I wanted to climb Drifika mostly just because it was so beautiful. And it was, again, about 6,400 meters. So it's below 6,500, so you don't need a permit for it. You just need a trekking permit for it. So I wanted to climb that really gorgeous peak. You come up the glacier here. And then you basically climb this ridge. That's, as far as I know, that's the only route on this. It would not be that hard, obviously, to climb a route here. I mean, it probably wouldn't be super easy, but it would be certainly possible. Really, really gorgeous mountain. One of the most gorgeous mountains I've ever seen. The crux is actually getting up through these ice falls, and mostly you're on the right side. Sometimes you got to go on the glacier. Sometimes you're forced off the glacier. Jeff and I went up there and got up next to the ice fall, and the weather turned bad, and we sat up there for a couple of days waiting for the weather. I just figured it was good acclimatization. I didn't realize it at the time, and the reason I include this picture is that Jeff's psych was kind of crashing. I didn't know this, but he and his wife were having problems, and they actually ended up getting divorced right after this. And he had a lot on his mind. And this is basically the last climbing he did on the whole trip. He kind of tapped out after this and went home. He didn't go home early, but he didn't really climb anymore. And I didn't really realize what was going on at the time. But now this picture and his attitude during this few days started to make more sense a little later. And also we were like sharing this little 2-man bibbler tent in bad weather. So obviously like sitting in there all day for 2 or 3 days wasn't that fun. So we did get it did clear up and we headed up. And it's basically just a steep snow climb that turns into a kind of a traversy ridge climb. It's not the easiest climbing to protect. This is actually kind of ice under here. So it was insecure, wasn't like just a romp like we expected it to be. And we got up here, and where I took this picture, there started to be some cornices, and the weather was bad enough I couldn't see. We were right up here on this summit, and we had to still get to the main summit, but we turned around, came back down because I just couldn't see where the cornices were. It was too dangerous. So that saved for that one for another day. Still haven't climbed Drifika. And after that, so we arrived in base camp on the 21st of June. Now we're up to the 10th. So we've been there about 20 days, 3 weeks, and we've done this. But most importantly, for me, I've been acclimatizing, and so that is a very Drifika is spelled with a K instead of a C, but the whole point for me was to get acclimatized. So K7 main is 6,942 meters. So I've been over 6,500 and close to 6,400 and had a few nights at higher elevation. So now I'm feeling quite fit in terms of acclimatization and ready to give it a go. So as I had said before, in 2003, I tried to go up here and then found this way and my high point 2003 was right here. And I'd come down like this, rappelling and down climbing all this. So, this was my take on, this was actually, I think, the first round for my gear. I had a few things I'm going to talk about the gear just a little bit because I always get a lot of questions about that. And this is the format where I can blab on a little bit, even though I know I'm going to go over 1 hour, but that is what it is. Let's talk about some of these things, like the headlamp. So the light is super important because I'm planning to climb at night and through the dark, and I need good light. So I carried extra batteries. I use lithium batteries because they have a greater performance, and you have to have double A's. Anything with a triple A just doesn't work well enough. This stove I actually have in my journal. I brought to base camp, see if I can find it, 5 or 6 different stove systems. And then I basically field tested them. I'd start with water. I brought a thermometer, so the water was always exactly 0 degrees Celsius, and I would bring it to a boil, and I would time it, and I would try different combinations. And I would also, from that, figure out, look at the weight and everything. And what I selected for this time, this was 2004, was this little titanium stove made by Snow Peak, and this little titanium pot, and then one fuel canister. You can't get white gas in Pakistan or in Nepal, so you're pretty much restricted to canister stoves. So that was one thing. The nutrition stuff, mostly goo energy. There's some whey protein in these sacks, and in this bottle had this stuff called Spiz, another product that is around. Some people will be familiar with is called Perpetuum. It's a hammer nutrition product, and it's sort of like a powdered form of goo, very roughly speaking. I'm not going to get into the details of the dietary breakdown of these things, but that was how I would I would use the goos on the go, and then when I had time to make water, I would do breaks. So I would basically just carry a liter of water and a liter of Spiz, which was this high calorie meal replacement. And I would kind of alternate between those. When I ran out of water, I would just stop and make more. And that was lighter weight than, you know, carrying 2 liters of water or whatever. And for one person, one 250 gram canister, you can make quite a bit of water. No, I'm not like making coffee and tea and hot drinks. I'm just basically melting snow until there's only a couple of ice chunks. You know, you're doing everything you can to make this as efficient as possible. Let's see. This is my neck gaiter. This is my shell jacket. I'll talk more about this. This is actually a jacket, a Patagonia jacket at the time called a Dragonfly. Now the version is called the Houdini, which is a little more open fabric. I still have this jacket. It was actually silicone treated, and it was pretty shut down. It didn't breathe at all, but it also didn't let wind through. Gloves, I ended up actually having, so this is a big pair of mittens and then 2 pairs of pretty heavy gloves. This may seem like a lot, but if I lose my hands, I'm basically gonna die. I have to have my hands. My connection to life is my ability to move up or down. And if I don't have my hands to set up rappels and so forth, I'm gonna have big, big problems. This is my hat, DOS parka. Talked a lot about DOS parkas. I'm a big believer in synthetic insulation and where you're you know, I'm on the move constantly. I need to be able to put this jacket on so that I dry my layers. I can't, and then my jacket continues to insulate. I can't be sweaty and put on a down jacket and have the down lose its insulation qualities because of the sweat freezing inside the jacket. This is a little Gravel backpack. It was just like a little, I don't know, super light 20-liter backpack. You'll see that a lot. This was a harness that was special made for me. It was just basically a super lightweight piece of webbing. It's definitely not CE rated or ISO 9000. It wasn't rated for anything. It was good for rappelling. This is a little rappel device that worked well with this 5.5 millimeter static rope. This is a 60 meter chunk of rope. I had a 50 meter chunk of rope the year before, but I went up in length a little bit. These are all titanium pitons. There's 6 titanium pitons there. 1 ice screw. I reduced the 1 ice screw from 2 because screws are heavy, and also because the ice is so good that I didn't need necessarily big long screws to make V-threads because I was drilling into really excellent ice all the time. A couple of nuts, some slings. This sling material actually I think mostly went away. This was all rappel sling and this cordelette. I ended up in the end starting to cut my piece of my rappel rope off to leave as slings. So you got to remember that I've got 60 meters of cordelette basically here that I can leave as slings. Pair of rock shoes, and a pair of crampons. These are the Gravel G14s, and these are called the Alpwing. So you can see we're right in the middle. You know, this was like the first. I was climbing leashless by now. But I still had an old cable leash kind of mounted here in case. I don't know why, actually. I didn't bring leashes. But this was kind of the beginning of leashless climbing for me, although other people have probably been doing it for a couple of years already. And just a helmet. And that's basically it. So here's I spent quite a bit of time. This is from my journal, just going through my notes. You'll see that this is a little different than what I actually had there on the ground. And I would kind of evolve every time. Basically, each time I came down, I would take some things out. And then this was basically my final food that I ended up bringing, was because I realized that for going for 48 hours, I really needed some real food, because on the other attempts, I made my successful ascent was actually the 7th attempt. 3 in 2003 and 4 in 2004. And I realized by the end that I needed to have something in my tummy. So I got these lentil soups and I got these dried potatoes that I would add a bouillon cube to. I didn't end up eating all of that, but it was good to have something. I would add the whey protein to the potatoes. Doesn't taste very good, but it worked. And I had these bars, a couple of bars, some raisins, some nuts, goos, and the 3 servings of the perpetuum powder. So my pack was 7 pounds, you know, basically, you know, 3 kilos. You can see right there, there's the proof. So this is another thing I wanted to talk briefly about. This journal, this is something I've done on every expedition, where in the front I have the date, I have my morning heart rate, because those of you that have, you know, this, especially back then, this used to be something I would use as a indicator for recovery. You can see, like, you know, here's the top of Nasser Brakk, and the next morning my heart rate's 58. And a couple days later, my morning heart rate's 48. Here's after we climb Kapura, my morning heart rate's 68. So you can see, you know, it drops back down to 40 here after a couple of mornings. So you can see the recovery there. This is the barometric pressure. This is the sky and the weather, and this is my maximum altitude of each day to sort of track my acclimatization. And this is kind of what I did each day, or some sort of note: 2 inches of snow in the morning, bouldering in the afternoon, that kind of thing. And so I have this for basically every expedition and probably I've ever done. And then, like, I'd make notes. This is how I remember these things. Here's how long it took. Here's where I actually did the climb on the 25th. You can see what I made notes. I would never remember this stuff now. I would never remember that I left at 5 in the afternoon, stuff like that. So I'm going to go, this is through the, oh, my boots are on my feet. They're Nuptse, they're La Sportiva Nuptses. Yeah, I'll talk about where I transitioned to the boots. I just saw that question. So my strategy in the beginning was a little different than it ended up. My strategy evolved over the course of 4 attempts, right? So in the beginning, I went up, I brought a fairly large backpack, plus all the stuff you just saw, and I just climbed a little bit up. This is 6, I started climbing off the glacier at 6 in the evening, 6:19 in the evening, and I carried this pretty big backpack up. There's the old fixed ropes from the Lampart trips, and I got onto the shelf there at the top of the rock climbing, and I made a bivvy. This picture is actually sideways, but I didn't realize it until just now. And I made myself a bivvy and slept here. So this just takes like 2 hours or so. And from this bivvy, this is where I left the rock shoes and then just climbed everything in boots from here. You can see my sort of bivvy setup. I brought like, I brought like normal food and fuel for sleeping overnight here. I did not bring a sleeping bag. I just brought a DOS parka and down pants. Yeah, that's what I did. But pretty nice view from this little perch here. And as you can see, these clouds are a little menacing. There's Drifika right there at the top of the valley. Base camp's back over here on the right. And this is what I woke up to the next morning. So this was the first attempt. Yeah, the shoes are katanas, yeah. I woke up, obviously, I just woke up to the snow falling on my face. Like I didn't make it all the way till morning. And I just bailed out of there and went back to base camp and ate some Pringles. And that's about it. So that first attempt was, it doesn't matter exactly, I can look it up, but that was pretty soon right after climbing the Drifika attempt. Came back to base camp, we had some unsettled weather. It got good, it went up again. This time I left a little earlier, 10 in the morning, just because I was stir crazy and wanted to get up there. Climbed up through this section again. This is all the rock shoe section. I had a bunch of pictures of this in the last slideshow, the 2003 slideshow, so I'm kind of minimizing the pictures of that section. Went up to my bivvy again. This plastic bag, that orange thing, is just my stash bag. There's my down pants, aka my shiver bag. And this is looking up from that. And then my idea was I would just start really early and climb up. So this time I actually got a pretty good attempt in. I started a couple of hours before dawn and started up that valley and headed up onto this shoulder. It's interesting to compare this area looked a lot different in 2004 than it did in 2003. I still felt like it was safe to climb through here. I think I climbed up through here, and then I think I climbed out this way. But it was definitely different topography than it was just 1 year earlier. This is on that same attempt above those first rocks. Those first rocks are there. The seracs are just kind of, I'm sort of in them, or they're just above me. And I'm trailing my rope here. I've got my harness on, I'm trailing my rope. I'm not belaying at all. I'm basically just pulling it because it's easier and sometimes to pull it than it is to have it in my pack, A. And B, if I get to a spot where I'm scared, I want to be able to just transition into a rappel. So I've got my ice screw on my harness. I've got my tools out. I've got my belay device on my belay loop. Like I can basically make a V thread and get out of there without having to like take my pack off and like mess around, right? Like I want to be ready for that eventuality. This is what the kind of climbing looks like. I went right up through here where that little icicle is, and then around to the right of that boulder. This is that same little section that you can see. That's that little icicle. So I got up there and I got into that glacier, and about the same high point I'd gotten under 2003, and there was a lot of snow, as you can see from my ice axe. I was actually a little spooked about starting an avalanche. And if I started a slab avalanche, I would just get swept to my death. There was like no real questions. There was actually the wind had been at the snow a little bit, and this was probably from that, previous storms. This wasn't snowing that much then. The weather was also turning and getting worse. But I realized that I probably just wasn't safe to continue. I don't know why this picture is so bad and dark, but it was. And then I went and did the rappels back down the same way I'd come down the year before. Found some of my slings and was able to reuse that stuff. Came back again a few days later. Same strategy again for the third time. Went up and made a little bivvy at the top of the rock climbing, and then started off and did the climbing. So here's another view. The rock climbing ends basically right there. And I made my bivvy right here. So I left my rock shoes there and just hiked up into here, and then made my bivvy right in here. And then this is where I soloed up all this stuff and then up into these rocks. So to not make this overly long, I'm trying to just kind of compress these sections. So this was the third attempt, and actually it was had some pretty good weather. And this is actually, I think, one of the most critical parts of this story. So at this point, I'm higher than I've ever been on the ridge, and I basically right here joined in with the original first ascent route, which was climbed by a Japanese expedition, a bunch of, I forget now, 1987. I'm really bad at that. It's all in the American Alpine Journals if we need to go look it up. But at this point, I basically completed my route, and now I'm on ground that's been climbed before. So I'm heading up this beautiful little ridge here. Actually, I should point out, so I go up in here, and I'm looking for a place to have one of these snack breaks. So I get up onto this ridge, and here's what I'm looking at ahead of me is this really big gendarme that looks really scary. But right before that, I had this beautiful little flat, secure place where I could just really let my guard down and relax. And I took advantage of that, and I ate some food. I hydrated. I did all that stuff and tried to just kind of bring myself down a little bit. So I'd basically been climbing, quite a long time to get up to this point. This section I'm going to talk about quite a bit because this was really, really hard to figure out. The red arrows indicate how I finally ended up going. You can see my tracks going across here, and they actually go up into this little hole, and you can kind of see where the snow has been kind of cut away there, and then actually climb down into this hole on the other side, then up this crack system, and then a big hard right over here, down a little bit, up here, and then up here, this was actually some not so easy climbing here. And then from this snowfield, it wrapped all the way around, doesn't look like it, but it wraps all the way around into a gully between this gendarme and the summit peak. And keep in mind, this is actually the summit, and this little eyebrow rock right below it, you can see in a number of pictures later on. So on this day, I had no idea. Oh, this feature, so I had a 60-meter rope. So from here to here, so I had to make I made a rappel here, and then I had another anchor, rappel anchor somewhere in the bottom of this corner. So that's about 30 meters. So this is probably, this whole thing is probably like 200 meters. So, you know, I'm speaking, this is 100 feet. So this is maybe 400 feet. So, and I'm quite high. I'm about 500 feet below the summit. I'm quite high. I'm over 20, well over 20,000 feet, 21,000 feet. So the first thing I tried, this is near from that lunch spot. I climbed over here, and I tried to go around the left side because I didn't know what was over here. So you can see my tracks down here. I went over here, and I climbed out to this little wishbone thing, and this was just really unconsolidated snow, and it didn't look promising at all, so I came back. Then I actually tried, you can see my tracks here. I went under this cornice, and I went way down this other side into this shadowed side. I'll show you some pictures of that. And that actually got me pretty close, but it didn't work out very well. So let's see. You can't really see it. That cornice was this one right here. So this is climbing. I climbed down here. This is where I traversed over against the gendarme, and then I went up, and it took me up into this stuff. And I actually tried to climb this through this, but this was actually overhanging, and it was kind of snacey. And felt really insecure, and I climbed back down and went all the way back around. That alone, that investigation took 2 or 3 hours to do. So I was down, I actually got turned around right there. Then I came back, and I went again across here, and I had not thought about this, but I went out here and just kind of probed along in here. I honestly had no idea where the Japanese climbers had gone, and I could find no sign of their passage at this point. So the next picture that I'm going to show you is taken actually right sitting in this little notch. And I got out there, and I kind of was able to sit there, and I was just like, what the heck? What am I going to do? You know, and this is like looking kind of down. There's a super exposed spot. I was quite close to this wall, but I really could see no sign of any passage. And this just looked, you know, if you're climbing with a partner, that looked like it might be okay. But really, like at this point, I was just looking from here. Just this distance is probably like 10 meters, 15 meters, 30, 45 feet. And I have no idea like how to get around this. I looked up this system. I had tried to go all the way down to see if I could come up around over here, and I couldn't do that on that earlier investigation. And I was about to give up, I gotta say, when I was sitting there. So I was able from this little point to kind of climb down into this thing, and it turned out to be a little easier than I thought. And then this is what it kind of looked like above me, getting up onto this sort of stance. And I almost turned around because this was sort of just snow. It wasn't really ice. I wasn't really sure where to go. I'm just free soloing all this. I don't have any belay. I'm really like, it's just kind of, my psyche is just kind of cratering. Like I don't know what to do. Like I just don't know what to do. But at the same time, I've invested so much to get here. I'm kind of like, well, I've got to tug on every door and see if any of them open. And this is kind of the last door I can think of to kind of test. So I go up there, and that's that that's that corner. And I'm just like, well, geez, what am I going to do with that? Like, it's not really ice. It's nice. And I'm standing there and I just chop away at it. And that's what I find. I find a piton. I find some slings. And I'm like, oh, okay. This is the first time I've found any sign of the Japanese ascent. I'm like, I'm at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track. But remember, I started super early in the morning before dawn. It's now actually getting, this all took a lot of time. So now it's actually getting, it's the middle of the, it's like kind of late after, I don't remember exactly, to be totally honest, but I know that I have to turn around pretty soon because it gets dark. So let's say it was like 4 o'clock or something. It was dark around, I've got this in my notes actually, my journal. It was dark at 7:30. So, I see this, and then I just start cleaning, and I start climbing. And this is the section I did not really self-belay this in a typical way. So at this time, this was around the same time, some of you will remember that Dean Potter was doing these speed solos in Yosemite. And I had talked to Dean, he was a Patagonia ambassador as well. And what he was basically doing is he was using, he wasn't self-belaying, he would have just 2 or 3, he had 3 daisy chains. And he would just be clipped into 3 pieces of gear. And his reasoning was, hey, I'm clipped into 3 pieces of gear. It's just like an anchor. Well, of course, they're not equalized or any of that. But, you know, and so I basically adapted that technique here. So I was basically clipped into 2 or 3 pieces of gear at all time. So that's my piton. This is my nut. I've taken my cordelet and I've actually made like a little step into it. You can see my foot is actually through the loop in the cordelet. So I'm aiding a little bit here because I just can't really be falling, right? Like I just gotta like not, like if I fall and rip out this gear, I'm for sure dead. Like there's no question. Nobody's ever even gonna find my body. So I'm definitely out on my own. I didn't have like load limiters in the system or anything like that. I didn't have locking carabiners. Like right here, all my weight is on one nut, and then I'm somehow probably clipped into this piton as well. But it's only like, it was only like 100 feet of this. It was only like, this was the only, I only self-belayed in any way this one little section. And here's looking up that section. And it doesn't look like, you don't see it much here, but I don't think I actually have very good pictures of it. But these are good cracks. These are really good cracks. You can kind of almost see more there how good those cracks are. It's actually a little bit of lichen. It gets warm enough that lichen grows up there. And so, you know, I just kind of cleaning the snow out and kind of working my way up here. And this is where I actually don't remember if I went left or right here, but I think right. Or actually, no, I remember now, looking at this picture, I went right here because, and I'll show you, there's a picture of an old piece of fixed rope that went out to the right here. So that was how I made my way up this little section. It wasn't really fast. It wasn't really glamorous. As I got higher, this is the last little part. There was actually this ice, really cool ice in there, which in a way was nice because I could ice climb, but in a way was a little bit scary because it wasn't really sort of aid climbing. And then I got up to that thing. There's that picture of that fixed rope. And I actually ended up reusing, there's a piton in there, and there's this other piton there. And I took this, I rejiggered this as an anchor to get down, to rappel down. But this was from, you know, these ropes are, gosh, I don't remember what the Japanese were there. I think it was 87. So yeah, somebody asked, it's actually higher than 20,000 feet. It's almost 23,000 feet. And so in the sun with no wind, yeah, it gets pretty warm. Pakistan is, you know, it's a lot colder than Nepal, but it's a lot warmer than most of like, you know, the Alps or the United States, just because it's a much lower latitude. You're at like, off the top of my head, I think you're at like 38 degrees north, 37 degrees north. So, you know, like the Alps are roughly 48, 49 degrees north. So much, 10 degrees of latitude makes a huge difference in the temperature. So here's where I climbed up. That's where that fixed rope was. And then I did that traverse around here, down here, and then up through here. So basically what happened is I got to here and I looked around this corner because this was another thing, like this was another unknown. And I was really worried that this would be super hard again. But I got here and I could see that this was climbable, but it was getting dark. And it was cold. It was as soon as when the sun goes out, we were just talking about how warm it was. So look at this next picture. So this is like just not that much longer later. And I'm also like, I hadn't brewed or eaten in a really long time. So I actually thought about it and I basically decided like I could make the summit, but if I do, I'm gonna lose fingers and toes. I'm like out of gas. Even if I start brewing right now and climb to the summit totally in the dark, which is obviously going to be dangerous, and make it back down somehow, like I'm so on the edge of what I'm going to be able to survive that I think that there's probably a good chance that I won't survive. That was a really, I mean, I won't say it wasn't a hard decision. I think it was a really good decision. It was a frustrating decision to make because I felt like I was so close. I was past the crux. Like I was roughly 2 hours of easy climbing from the summit. You know, I was 100 meters. I was 300 feet roughly, let's say. I don't know exactly. I probably wrote down what my estimate was at the time in the journal. And so that was a frustrating decision, but it was the decision I needed to take. I climbed back across that traverse. And then this is actually the rappel from that fixed rope where those two pitons were, looking back down at this ridge feature here, where I go down. And I climbed down all night. This was a really good decision to go down because this was a really hard night. There's a lot. So basically, the way I would deal with anything that wasn't real fifth class climbing, I told myself I had to down climb because it's like over 7,000 feet of climbing, right? So if I'm rappelling all that with 100-foot rappels, 30-meter rappels, I'm just not going to, A, I'm not going to have enough gear, B, it's going to take too long. So you have to down climb a lot of really exposed, relatively technical ground where you're actually faced in ice climbing a lot. And it's mentally very, very tiring, very, very straining. I also want to point out, like as I started, my mindset was totally different than it would be like now, where I was like kind of like totally locked in. To this, this is the point I'm going to just here. I think maybe this is a better picture. I meant to bookmark it, but I forgot. See if I can find it. I wanted to read this quote that I actually wrote in my journal to kind of give you this isn't me writing, this was a quote I read. If I can find it, that I wanted to read to kind of give a I don't think I'm going to find the one I wanted so quickly. My bad for not putting a post-it note in there. I know it's right here in these pages. I'll see if I can find it. Shoot. Okay, well, I'm not going to find it. I don't want to give up. Oh, here it is. So this just kind of give you a sense of the mindset. And this is actually a picture when I came back down to where I had the bivvy after basically down climbing all night. Consider the core of the mind to be a wagon with willpower to be carried about in it. Push it to a place where there can be, I can read my own writing. Oh, push it to a place where there can be failure and there will be failure. Push it to a place where there can be success and there will be success. But whether there is success or failure, if one entrusts himself to the straightness of the wagon and the core of the mind, he will attain right-mindedness in either case. So I read that because I just want to point out, like, that's the kind of stuff. So this was written in my journal the day before I went up on the final attempt, or final successful climb. That was my mindset. It didn't really matter to me if I was successful or not. The whole point was the process of going through this experience of trying my hardest at something, right? That was the quest. And I think that's what art is, right? Like, that's the art. Art is not the painting that's produced. It's who the artist is after he paints the painting, sees and then creates the painting. So I came back down this. I had a big explosion here. I actually changed my strategy after this. I sat here for quite a while in the sun thinking about stuff, and I decided it wasn't worth having the bivvy. And that I should just change my timing, I decided that I needed to get to that gendarme, that big technical climbing area, like early in the morning. So I needed to be there, say at 8, 9 in the morning. Because it was still going to take a long time, even though now I knew where to go to climb those last couple hundred feet, just because it's the most technical part of the route. So I packed everything up here and went back down. I don't remember how many days it was, but it wasn't terribly long. Between that attempts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it was 6 days. It was 6 days later I came back. So 6 days later I came back, and I left base camp at 5 in the evening. But this time, my gear pictures became much less organized. This time, this is my gear. I had a lot less, you can see. This is the little stove kit. This is my food kit. There's the bottles. This is just like clothes and stuff. But I added another screw. I switched belay devices. I had fewer pitons and more nuts. I had this V-threader tool, which I actually always had, just wasn't in the picture before. You know, I switched, these are aluminum heel pieces that I put on my G14 crampons to kind of lighten them up. Same rope, same number of gloves are here. That doesn't look like it, but I know for a fact I had the white pair of gloves with the duct tape on them. And yeah, so that's it. Same little backpack. So I climbed up as high as I could during that evening, and then following the same route, I kind of got to go fast through this, and got up quite high. This was actually looking over to K7 West, which Marco and Vincent and I did the first ascent of a couple years later in 2007. Here's where I join the Japanese route up here. There you can see my track coming up there. Looking back down into the valley, down at base camp. Coming up the ridge and nearing the point where I get to that good place where I can eat and drink. Cool little area where you climb through this. This is where I was talking about, where there's that safe place where I could brew and rest. There's this cool little wind feature that was formed. You climb up into that. And there's the gendarme right there. And that's the main summit. Remember that little rock. It's a little more melted out now. So here I am at 6,100 meters at 7:37 in the morning. That's what I wanted to accomplish with this attempt. So now this is looking over to, let's see, that's the east. This peak is still unclimbed. It's kind of a complicated mountain, but it would be an interesting objective for somebody. It's almost as high as K7. It doesn't have a name. It's probably about 6,800 meters. This is Hassan Peak, and then Linksar would be behind here somewhere. You can't see it because this is too close. And this is looking the other direction down the valley. That's actually Masherbrum right there. And this is part of K7 West. So as you know by now, I climbed up through here This is actually a 2003 picture, not a 2004 picture. Climbed up through here, and I'm basically right here at the base of this gendarme. So there's the route. You guys are all familiar with that now. So this time I was able to just kind of head straight across to actually, I can't remember now if I went under this, around this side or this side. But anyway, I was able to head straight across and get right on the business of this climb. This is looking down as I traversed across. And that got me into here. So there's that picture was, I think, taken right there. And then that got me into here. Now this section, this is the same picture, but I didn't take as many pictures on the actual climb, maybe because I was figuring I'd been here before. This section didn't go, and this picture is also from the previous attempt. This is not from the actual summit climb. This is actually from the actual summit climb. I know that just because I know that picture, they're in just, these were all slide films, so they're in order on the slides, but not in digital. Climbing on aluminum, I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, the aluminum crampons. Yeah, the aluminum heel pieces. Well, I'm front pointing all the time, so it doesn't really matter that much. So here, this is actually a good picture because it showed, you can see my track where I came up from the previous attempt like 7 days ago. And here I am climbing up again to that piece of fixed rope, and then I head to the right around this corner. So this picture is taken somewhere like right in here, just before that traverse. And then this picture is, this is the top of that gendarme. So I climbed up, you climb up right here, and then you take this big traverse. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened right here. I got into this little call, and you can't really see it. But as you can tell, there's cornices here, and there's probably a cornice over here. And right when I got into this call, this cornice collapsed, literally right in front of my face. I thought I was well below the cornice, but about 20 feet of ridge just disappeared, really, literally like right in front of my chin at the place where my tools were. It was absolutely terrifying. And I didn't literally shit my pants, but I probably would have if I'd had anything to dispose of there. Like the whole thing, and it's like a movie that I can replay in my mind. It was so steep on the other side. It was this, the snow disappeared and I just watched it fall, but it didn't make any noise because it was just falling free down the west face of K7 for hundreds and hundreds of feet. And then it just exploded down there and made a bunch of noise. But my mind like couldn't calculate like what was happening. Like, I think that's what it would be like to actually fall through that. Like your mind you wouldn't understand what was happening until it was all over, until it was too late. It was really terrifying. And my adrenaline just like went totally through the roof. And it kind of, that level, that amount of adrenaline kind of had you know, you got to remember, so this was, I forget what I'm looking at the book because I need to remember 26 hours and 45 minutes to the summit. And so that's basically 26 hours and 45 minutes of almost nonstop climbing except for one break. I don't remember, I didn't write down how long my break was, but let's say it was an hour and a half. And to be that like extended physically on that kind of have like been going for that long, and then to be flooded with that level of adrenaline, and then that wore off the rest of the day, rest of this adventure. I kind of like had this big crater from that. It was really, really terrifying. It really affected me, if you can't tell. So there's a little higher. So then I started to take pictures because this was the last light. It was getting dark, and I was basically pushing as hard as I could to get to the summit before it turned dark. And that gives you an idea of how long it took. I just want to point out a couple of these peaks here because it's such an amazing skyline. This is Masherbrum here, and this is K2 and Chogalisa. I've pointed these out in other slideshows. I've used this picture before. And this is the Masherbrum group. This is Masherbrum 1, Masherbrum 2, Masherbrum 3, and Masherbrum 4. There's more Masherbrums, but they're kind of hidden behind Chocolisa. There's 7 of them. And then Sasser Kangri would be over here, a really big, high, almost 8,000 meter peak, big snowy peak. It was right over here. Yeah, and this is the summit of K7 West, actually, right? It's actually the summit's right over there. This is the 4 summit. This is the main summit. And these are that peak that I couldn't remember, with the 3 buttresses that I couldn't remember the names of. I think are those. Anyway, so getting higher, racing up to the summit as fast as I can. Again, you can see this is that eyebrow rock, and this is the summit that you can see there. And there it is. This is basically the last picture I took of the summit because it got dark. I took this picture looking out to Masherbrum with the last light. This was just, for the people that are interested, this was what was the Fujifilm, the 100 speed? It wasn't the Velvia Provia, I think, 100. So it wasn't a very fast film. This was a little Ryko point and shoot. So not a very fast lens. But really, you can see how steep this north face of Masherbrum is. This is almost 8,000 meter peak, almost 8,000 meter high peak. To have a mountain that big be that steep, that's some really incredible geomorphology at work there. So I took this picture because, again, it was like the last picture in the light. And I was just pushing to get up there. And not too much later, I got to the summit. There was actually this boulder you can see right behind my shoulder that was on the summit. As an aside, I'll tell this story now, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the summit. But so Bruce Miller and Doug Chabot repeated the Japanese route from the bottom just behind me. So we overlapped slightly on the mountain, but they started the day that I came down. So they were starting the route the day I came off the mountain. So we'd missed. And Doug, and when they got up here, he got back down. He's like, Steve, you didn't summit because you did get on the boulder, but I did. So he'd gotten up there, scrambled up on the boulder to claim the true second ascent. I'll give it to him. You know, I'm good with what I did, no problem. I couldn't see what was up there. And I was so scared of falling off the mountain, obviously, that I figured that, you know, the summit, I could touch it. It was right there about next to my head. So, a lot of people ask me about this flag, particularly American patriots, because it's a Pakistani flag. That is true. So this flag was given to me by Rasul, who is my friend and cook that I've talked about. He'd been on with me on a number of I think this was the 4th or 5th expedition I'd been on with Rasul as my cook. And on one of the attempts, Rasul had given me this flag. And I was actually initially like really bummed because I was doing everything to eliminate weight, right? Like I was not bringing safety equipment because I wanted to be as light as possible so I could climb as fast as possible. And he gave me this thing that had no value in terms of my safety or feeding me or anything like that. And one of the things that was really good that happened to me was I was looking at that flag in base camp and I realized that those like 1 or 2 ounces that it weighed weren't going to make any difference. It wasn't going to come down to 2 ounces in my backpack. I wasn't like pushing the limit, you know, human limits of performance to that degree, right? And that took a big weight off of my shoulders. And other thing is that I knew it would mean a tremendous amount to Rasul if I did that for him. And he was my friend. And so it kind of gave me this new sense of purpose. And it gave me 2 things. It gave me this realization that wasn't going to be the make or break thing. And it gave me this other thing, like, you know, if Rasul works for me and does things for me and gives to me all the time. And if this is what he wants me to do for him, he's never asked me really for anything, then that's a fair trade. So I took this picture for Rasul and I gave him this flag afterwards and he still has it to my knowledge. So that's the story of the flag. So now it's just after dark. I'm alone on almost a 7,000 meter technical peak with 200 feet of rope and a few stoppers, right? Like what are you gonna do now? So it was a long night getting down. One of the things I did was I had told myself that I was just gonna go really slow. I knew I wasn't gonna fall asleep. It was too cold. And I needed to survive. I needed to not make any mistakes. So, and if I was losing my focus, I would just like build an anchor and clip myself in and just sit down. And there were a few times where I actually did that and I dozed off and I just fell asleep you couldn't fall asleep for very long because it was cold. It was night on a high altitude mountain. But I would just, I had hours and hours and hours where this was my view. I was down climbing, steep kind of snow, neve, ice, where failure and mistakes were not an option. It was absolutely, like if I fell at any of these points, I was anywhere from this mountain, I was dead. Like, as you know, from the other parts of the story, I rappelled. I had basically done all this descent before, right? Like, only part that was new was the top few hundred feet. So I had it pretty well dialed. I knew where I was. I knew where I was going. The weather was good. There was no wind. There was no cloud, all these things. But I can say that this was one of the harder nights of my life. Just, both of those nights coming off on the 6th attempt that came so close to the summit and after the final attempt, after the successful ascent, those were really, really tough nights and took a lot out of me mentally, just to kind of keep going through that. So I climbed all the way through until dawn, and there's the sunrise looking out to Drifika and Kapura Peak. Pretty cool. Also knowing that I had just in the last couple of weeks been on the top of Kapura and just below the summit of Drifika, and now it climbed K7 as well. I got back down to base camp at 10:45 in the morning. It's written in my journal. And Marco had left a beer for me, and the Slovenians in the audience will recognize the Laško Pivo, one of my favorite beer in Slovenia, which is the beer of my town, the town where I was an exchange student back in the day. And he had left that for me in the stream, and that was absolutely the best beer I've ever drank in my life. That was amazing. That was when I came back to base camp. One of the things that was weird was everyone was gone because the other guys were all out climbing. Rasul was there, and the liaison officer was there, but these other guys were all gone climbing. So I was kind of by myself for I think it was 2 full days. Obviously, like I came back, I drank this beer, I ate some food, but you know, anybody who's done a big ultra style endurance events knows like you're kind of hungry, but you're kind of not, and you can't really eat that much. And I ate something and I just went to sleep, and I slept like all afternoon, all night, all the next morning. Basically ate and slept all the next day, and then I think guys started to come back in to camp that next afternoon. So I do want to, I don't have any pictures of it. If I'd had minimal organized, I would have made some time for it. I do want to make a shout out to Bruce and Doug. This is Bruce's pack when, this is, I don't know, this is one of when they went up there. This is like a climb that is really unknown. People don't know that these guys climb K7 as well. Like my ascent is maybe well known, but these guys climbed it like a couple days later, repeating the Japanese route, made the 3rd ascent of the mountain. These are amateur alpinists. I don't want to say that in any kind of disparaging way, but these guys are really, really good climbers, really good alpinists with tons of experience, and they did a great ascent. And by climbing K7 by any route is a very proud accomplishment, in my opinion. And these guys went classic alpine style. I think I don't remember the details because so long ago, but they were up there for 4, 5, 6 days, had a tent, sleeping bags, you know, and climbed the route and did a great job with it. And it was really, really cool. And these guys are both both still around. And I do have, this is Bruce when he came down, and this is Doug when he came down. So you can see, again, like I love the expression in people's faces when they come down from a big climb. That's Rasul there, bringing Doug his tea and giving him the congratulatory shoulder massage. So, you know, that was the end of July 2004. I kind of just want to end with these couple of pictures and to talk just sort of extemporaneously for a second about what this means to me. This is the last 600 feet of the mountain. There's the summit right there. And this is absolutely by far the hardest part of the whole climb. And I mean, so many of the things that we go through in life, including our current situation with the coronavirus pandemic, we get pretty high sometimes, and it doesn't work out. Sometimes you even climb a lot of the crux and you get around the corner and you gotta go back down. And I mean, we're in this and it's all pretty hard. And the reason we're doing this is because millions of us are all on kind of shelter in place orders. And that's working. We're slowing the spread of the disease. We can see that now, but we don't really know how many more attempts we're going to have to make at this to stick it. And it's going to be really important that we all kind of work together and keep our psyche up for whatever comes, as hard as it may seem when this turns out to be, you know, just month one of multiple months, or, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen. But good news has been starting to come out. And I guess what I want to say is, let's not kind of get our hopes up. Let's be pragmatic and hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, so to speak. And hope that we have some more days in the mountains ahead of us. And we certainly do. Might not be this summer, but we all have these some good days in the mountains ahead of us. So I'm gonna conclude with that. And
Steve, can I interject a little something?
Yeah.
So to everybody that's still on with us, I wanted to remind you to send any questions you have for next Thursday's Ask Me Anything session. You can send them to scott@uphillathlete.com. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Scott. Yeah, I agree with Scott. Send the questions, and I will see you all this time, or Scott will see you, and I will too, as this time next week. And thanks for joining. Let's see.